Donald Trump is heard on tape discussing classified documents. It's a crucial piece of evidence in a federal investigation into his handling of sensitive documents. So, how will this affect the case and the Republican race for the White House? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Folly Thibault. It's a 2-minute recording that could prove devastating for Donald Trump.
He said that I wanted to attack Iran. Isn't it amazing? I have a big pile of papers. This thing just came up.
Media outlets in the United States have obtained an audio recording in which the former president appears to acknowledge keeping classified documents after leaving office. The recording was reportedly made in July of 2021, and the documents apparently refer to sensitive information about a possible attack on Iran. Trump is facing 37 federal charges for his handling of classified documents. He's pleaded not guilty. So just how damaging is this recording, and will it affect next year's presidential race? We'll put these questions to our guests in just a moment, but first this report from our White House correspondent, Kimberly Harkett.
In his first public remarks since the release of a controversial audio recording, Donald Trump lashed out at those investigating him for allegedly removing classified documents from the White House.
This stuff doesn't hold up, and people know it. This is the continuation of the greatest witch hunt of all time. That's all it is. And its primary purpose is election interference, and we're not going to let this election be stolen from us.
The former president made the remarks while campaigning in New Hampshire on Tuesday. In the new audio, recorded during a 2021 interview at his New Jersey golf course, Trump appears to show classified material to aides and a writer working on a memoir of a Pentagon plan for a U.S. attack against Iran, presented to him by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, while Trump was president.
With Milley, let me see that. I'll show you an example. He said that I wanted to attack Iran. Isn't it amazing? I have a big pile of papers. This thing just came up. Look. This was him. They presented me this. This is off the record, but they presented me this. This was him. This was the Defense Department and him.
Yeah.
I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case, you know. Mm-hmm. Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information.
The U.S. Justice Department's charged Trump with 37 counts of mishandling top-secret documents. The audio seems to counter Trump's claim dozens of boxes found last year at his Mar-a-Lago estate were just newspaper clippings. Prosecutors say many of those documents were instead highly classified. The recording may also prove the government's case that Trump did not declassify the material as he should have while in office.
This was done by the military, given to me. I think we can probably, right?
I don't know. We'll have to see. Yeah, we'll have to try to
Declassify.
figure out yeah.
See, as president, I could have declassified
Yeah.
it. Now I can't, you know, but this is
Yeah,
classified.
now we have a problem.
Former President Trump is currently awaiting trial. He's pleaded not guilty to the charges. His trial date is set for August, but prosecutors are pushing to have that date moved to the end of the year. I'm Kimberly Harkett in Washington for Inside Story.
Well, Trump's legal issues extend well beyond this case. In March, he became the first former president to face criminal charges after he was indicted for falsifying business records. It was in connection with the payoff he made to the porn star Stormy Daniels. One of the biggest cases is the Justice Department's investigation into Trump's role in encouraging a violent attack of the Capitol in January 2021. The case includes his efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Then there's the Georgia investigation, which focuses on Trump's reported attempt to have officials there alter the results of the state's 2020 presidential vote. Let's bring in our guest now for today's show. In Washington, D.C., John Malcolm, Vice President of the Institute for Constitutional Government at the Heritage Foundation. He's also a former U.S. federal prosecutor. In Birmingham, in the UK, Scott Lucas, professor at the Clinton Institute, University College Dublin. And also in Washington, D.C., Bruce Fein, a former U.S. Associate Deputy Attorney General and a constitutional lawyer. Gentlemen, welcome to Inside Story. Thank you very much for joining us. Bruce Fein in Washington, let me start with you. Former President Trump has always said that the documents he took with him from the White House were declassified. But this published audio recording appears to contradict this. How damning is this? And is this a nail in the case against Trump?
Well, I think it's an exaggeration to point to just one piece of evidence as conclusive. The burden is on the prosecutor to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. This certainly undercuts the president's former claim, maybe he still maintains it, that he could just think about declassifying a document in his head and it became declassified by magic. Here, at least the tape, if it's authentic, suggests that he knew that you would need to do certain things in a formal way to declassify a document. He hadn't done it, at least with regard to this document concerning a potential attack on Iran. So this is not helpful to Mr. Trump. I think it may force him to consider testifying, which he probably doesn't want to do in the case, to try to undermine its impact. But I wouldn't say that it makes it a slam dunk.
Bruce, is it clear from the indictment if the documents that were referenced in the recording are the ones recovered by the investigators?
Well, the indictment parallels exactly what you played in terms of putting in transcript in written form, the exchange, especially, it's too late to declassify. So there's a parallel there, which would lend authenticity to the audio that we listen to. Mm-hmm. But you have a trial so that the other side can cross-examine. You never take anything at face value.
All right. John Malcolm, what was your first reaction when you heard this recording? Does it tell you anything you didn't know already?
No, it doesn't tell me anything I didn't know already, because that transcript is contained in paragraph 34 of Jack Smith's indictment that is pending down in Florida. But just as a picture is worth 1,000 words, an audio recording has more of an impact than reading a transcript on camera. It also leaves open, I suppose, the possibility that Jack Smith could indict former President Trump for disclosing classified information to a person who didn't have the requisite clearances. And he could do that in New Jersey, since this exchange took place at his resort in Bedminster, New Jersey. I doubt he's going to do that. I think if he was going to do that, he would have done it already. And I agree with Bruce. Look, these are allegations. The former president has taken somewhat of a scattershot approach. He said, well, I declassified these records and I had a right to keep them under the Presidential Records Act. And each one of these pieces of evidence puts a chink in that defense.
John, he said in the tape, it's so cool that he has these classified documents. Those are his words. Why did he do it, you think? Was this just about showing off?
Oh, I have no idea. There are stories out there that he was convinced by associates that he had a right to have these documents under the Presidential Records Act. Maybe he did it because he wanted to confront people who were, saying bad things about him, which is what he appears to be doing in the tape that you just played. There could be myriad of reasons as to why he kept them, although he shouldn't have.
Okay. Scott Lucas, your thoughts about this tape and what you heard. How damning is it for Donald Trump?
Well, I agree, first of all, with John and with Bruce, that it doesn't change the substance of the legal case against Donald Trump in this indictment. Indeed, the existence of this audio tape, not the actual tape being played, but the existence of this tape became known at the end of May, more than a week before Trump was indicted. But on the political front, of course, what this does is this amplifies, as it were, the indictment. It amplifies the seriousness of it, and it does cause a real problem for Donald Trump's public defense, which has varied from, oh, the FBI planted documents, I didn't know the documents were there, and then, of course, that idea that he could declassify them either with a signature or in his mind. That's kind of gone now. What I find most interesting about this is the context of this case, because this document was one of the most sensitive in the U.S. government. It was a document about U.S. war plans on Iran. Now, why would Donald Trump release U.S. war plans on Iran to a writer, a publisher, as well as to staff who were in the room? It is because he wanted to score a point against the current and then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley. Donald Trump, who has a series of grievances with Milley, wanted to make Milley look bad, make him look like a warmonger on Iran, and portray Trump as the sensible, responsible statesman who had avoided war. And the reason why he presented this document is he thought it helped that case. And as he makes clear, consequences be damned, even if he wasn't supposed to be revealing that document to anyone.
Scott, you say it doesn't change the substance of the case. Trump has said in the past that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and no one would care. Is this the case with this recording? Do you think his followers, his supporters, will care about this?
Well, you know, there are some people who, come hell or high water, have stuck with Donald Trump throughout his years as a candidate, as president, even to the point of when he allegedly incited the Capitol attack in January 2021. And I don't think it shifts the needle on those folks. I don't think it shifts the needle on those folks who are firmly against Trump. But there are a lot of Americans who aren't in one of those two camps. And I think what this does is it sort of blows away the initial defense of Trump supporters, which is there's nothing to see here, folks. Let's move along. Let's talk about other issues. It highlights the fact that, no, this is a serious issue. This isn't just a court case. This is a court case about leaking documents. And it's not just about leaking documents. It's about leaking top secret documents, which are vital to American national security.
Bruce Fein, what do you think the defense of Trump could be of this? Can his defense team come up with anything to counter this evidence?
Well, it's difficult. I mean, we're just talking about this one count. Yeah, we're talking about an indictment that alleges not only that he retained national defense information, which is the standard in the Espionage Act. It doesn't use the word classified information. But he's also been indicted for obstruction of justice. But let's put the obstruction of justice aside for the moment. What can his defenses be? Well, he could say he didn't have any reason to believe. It could be adversely prejudicial to the interest of the United States. In fact, and I've written about this, my view is that, and I don't know whether you take the issue, is that you can make an arguable case that the Espionage Act is overbroad under the First Amendment because you don't have to prove there was actual injury or impairment to the national security of the United States, just that there was reason to believe that it might happen. It's a standard of actual injury that was established in the Pentagon Papers case, the New York Times versus United States. So he could challenge the constitutionality of the Espionage Act under the First Amendment. He's never suggested they would do that. In the past, he'd kind of praised the Espionage Act as applied to others, but I believe that's his best defense. Otherwise, you don't have to, under the Fifth Amendment, to have any defense at all. Just tell the prosecutor's got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, that I had reason to believe this would be damaging to the interests of the United States, and I shared it with people not authorized. It's not the strongest case in the world if you're not taking your own defense, but he might do that.
John, do you agree with Bruce? How do you prepare a defense when it's right there on tape?
Well, certainly the defense that Bruce just talked about is one he is likely to raise. He has also talked extensively about the Presidential Records Act and his belief that he had a right to have those documents. This is an audio tape, not a videotape. I suppose he could argue, I alluded to these documents, but I didn't actually show the documents. The one thing where I just disagree with Bruce, not as a tactical matter. I agree with you that anytime a defendant takes the stand, it is a very, very risky proposition. But this is Donald Trump we're talking about. I think it will be extremely difficult to keep him off of the stand. He will just want to tell his story.
Bruce, do you think he's going to take the stand?
Well, you can try to extrapolate from the track record. We know that, he did not take the stand in the civil case brought by Jean Carroll, I guess, on the sexual assault issue. We know that his attorney, John Dowd, and I knew John when I was at the Justice Department, told Trump, I'm never going to let you be deposed by Mueller. And he said openly, because, you're going to destroy yourself. So in the past, his lawyers have urged him not to testify, and he hasn't done so. On the other hand, he has been subject to depositions before. And it's really, my view is his lawyers will urge him not to testify. But he may decide he's going to testify anyway. He thinks he can sway the jury. You can see how he performed on the CNN town hall interview, kind of barging through the interrogator. But I think it's very, very risky. But at this stage, you got to take risks given the substantial odds he's confronting now.
All right, Scott Lucas, let's talk about the political implications of all this. This is not the first case against Donald Trump. I mean, there are other cases, the hush money payment case, the January 6th insurrection investigation. The Republican presidential candidates, except for Chris Christie perhaps, have largely defended Donald Trump and criticized Jack Smith, right? Can this be the opening, perhaps, for some of the Republicans to change their tune on this?
You need to ask them. But unfortunately, they're not here. So let's talk about the record today. Remember, it's not just the case of Trump being under indictment. I mean, the fact is the Trump organization was convicted in 2022 in New York State over business malpractice. There are pending cases in New York State regarding fraud and tax matters associated with Trump. And of course, there was the conviction on sexual assault of E. Jean Carroll in the 1990s, with Trump being ordered to pay out $5 million. So that's a lengthy legal record that he's compiled. But that said, what you've seen so far from the Republican candidates is you've seen Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, who's trying to out-Trump Trump. He's trying to take up fairly extreme positions and win over the Trump voters. So he's probably not going to go after Trump.
Why? Why are they so reluctant? Why is someone like Ron DeSantis so reluctant to go after Trump?
Because the Republican politicians are being held hostage by Donald Trump, and the perception that Trump voters are still a significant part of the Republican constituency. And so if they alienate Trump voters, they don't have a hope in the primaries next year. It's as simple as that. It's the reason why Mike Pence, even though Donald Trump was willing to let Mike Pence be attacked on January the 6th, 2021, did nothing to get him out of that predicament during the Capitol attack, why Mike Pence has been loath to come out against Trump. It's why other candidates have tried to avoid comment on these legal matters, except for, as you noted, Chris Christie, who's coming from a slightly different background in the way that his campaign tactics will run. I'll just refer you to something which happened a couple of years ago, which still is striking to me, and that is at a time when Donald Trump had survived the second impeachment trial and was not convicted, but at a time when even Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, was saying the courts must hold him to account, Kevin McCarthy, who is currently the Republican House Speaker, he initially criticized Trump over the Capitol attack, and then within 2 weeks, he went to Florida and he pledged allegiance to Trump. And I think you see other candidates who think, do I stand up against Trump, or do I not necessarily bow down before him, take a pass on this? They go for the latter, because they think that Trump votes in certain states, key states, are essential to their chances of advancing.
John Malcolm, your thoughts. Why do some Republican candidates want to take a pass on this? And what impact does it have on the Republican primary? And aren't Republicans fearful that if Trump represents them, they might lose the House and Senate in the next election?
Well, first of all, Joe Biden is himself vulnerable. There are a majority of people across political parties that think he's too old and should not run. I agree with a lot of what Scott said. The other thing that I would say is that Donald Trump has done a remarkably good job at persuading a broad number of people, a very, very large number of people, that there is a two-tiered system of justice at play that targets conservatives. And he has also convinced his supporters that they're not really after Donald Trump, they are after them, and that they're trying to get to them through Donald Trump, and that Donald Trump is standing up for them as their champion. And I think that other than that, Scott is right. Everyone else is sort of waiting to see what's going to happen, see whether these other indictments make a dent. And they want to be able to get all of those current Trump supporters to come over and vote for them if that happens.
Right. Bruce Fein, for our international audience, what happens if a presidential candidate is indicted?
Well, he's already been indicted. So you're seeing it, as you're speaking, the three of us and watching things unfold.
In
Now,
what way will it hinder the campaign? I mean, and will it hurt him in the polls? Are there practical ways in which he couldn't be able to campaign, for example?
Well, I don't think that his numbers have been impacted substantially by the two outstanding indictments we have now, one in New York and one in Mar-a-Lago. I do think that the political fallout would be greater if he's indicted for the January 6th insurrection. Mm-hmm. And on that score, I do want to call attention to another candidate, Mike Pence, who basically said, in distancing himself, in my view, legally, substantially from Trump, said on the morning of January 6th, Trump approached him and said, you got to choose between me and the Constitution. In other words, are we going to have a rule of law or a rule of men? And Pence said, I chose the Constitution, and we know what Trump did to Pence and kind of let him out hang to dry. And so the reason why January 6th looms so large politically is because under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, if there's a conviction under insurrection, there's a disqualification of anyone in that position from ever occupying not only the presidency, any office under the United States. Mm-hmm. And I do think that would move the issue in a different direction, because it's going to be very difficult for Mike Pence to walk back his words, which are about as incriminating as you can get.
Okay, interesting. So what happens then if he's elected, let's say, we're speculating here, of course, if he's elected with a case still in progress?
Well, we have this very unusual feature. Could a president pardon himself? Now, I confronted that issue that didn't have to reach fruition at the Justice Department when President Nixon was under investigation by Archibald Cox, and then he was fired, and then it was the special prosecutor Leon Jaworski, and there was worries, well, is President Nixon going to pardon himself, which would prevent a prosecution? There was no clear recognition whether there would be any obvious conflict of interest that would prevent that pardon from being effective. So it's an unknown territory, and it's possible if President Trump were elected, he could pardon himself and move all of these cases off the docket, because you can issue a pardon even before an indictment, not only after indictment. So those are the stakes when it comes to the rule of law, at least as a possibilities. I underscore it's an unknown constitutional terrain right now.
Yeah, uncharted territory. Scott Lucas, Trump still holds a commanding lead over his announced primary opponents. Could that change? Who or what do you see as his biggest challenge right now?
I have a lot of speculation. Indeed, it plays into Donald Trump's hands to speculate about political ramifications, because what Trump is trying to do is to play the victim and at the same time say, if you prosecute me, if you pursue this, it only makes me stronger. The fact of the matter is that we still have 8 months before the first Republican primaries and caucuses. We still have 17 months before it is the general election, and that's a long and winding road. What I can tell you right now is that this lays out into something which will be the case of facts and the legal process versus white noise. And the white noise, which will be there on social media, it'll be there on certain media outlets in the United States, is to try to simply cover up the legal process, to wish it away, to turn it into a deep state plot against Donald Trump, to raise other distracting issues. And that raises a broader issue, because if that white noise triumphs, if the legal facts of this case and of the other case are obscured or ripped apart by deception, by misrepresentation, it says something about the challenge to American democracy, a challenge which could be at its greatest point since 1865.
It's still a long time, as you say, Scott, until the Republican primary. Now, the Biden team, interestingly, has been very quiet for the time being. Will this change, in your view, over the next few months as the campaign heats up? How do they handle this without commenting on the legal developments, without looking like they're interfering in the case one way or another?
You don't comment on the case because it would be interference. That's not just a political decision, that's a legal decision. This is a case which is being brought by the Justice Department. It's being brought by federal prosecutors. The judicial branch of the United States must remain separate from the executive branch, and that must be respected by the president, whether he's named Joe Biden or someone else. So I would expect no comment on the details of this case now or in the future, no matter how much, again, white noise is thrown up to try to force or push Joe Biden into making a comment which would be inappropriate.
All right, John, your thoughts. How do you see all this proceeding and progressing? It's complicated, isn't it, to deal with classified documents in court?
It is. So commenting on what Scott just said, that's not the only reason Joe Biden won't comment on this. He is himself still under investigation by a special counsel for possession in his own right of classified documents. And there is all of these reports out there from whistleblowers and whatnot that his son, Hunter Biden, just got a real sweetheart deal in Delaware, and that the Department of Justice obstructed that investigation. So President Biden enters into very, very hot water if he comments, at least at this stage, on this indictment. Scott's also right. There's a long time between the first caucuses and primaries and a longer time before the election. I think that President Trump, probably about 50% of his support is very, very firm. The other 50% are fishing around and could be persuaded to join other candidates. And I think that is waiting to see what other shoes drop.
Okay. Bruce Fein, I'll give you the last word. Your thoughts about Joe Biden and the Democrats. Can they capitalize on this? And how do you see this case against Donald Trump progressing and proceeding?
Well, I certainly agree. The position of Mr. Biden should be complete silence. That's what it means to have a rule of law rather than a rule of men. Process is so important. It's the centerpiece of our democratic dispensation. He shouldn't say a single word other than that there's a presumption of innocence. Mr. Trump is entitled to all the rights that any other defendant would have. Let's have this decided in a court of law. And in advance, we accept the verdict, no matter what it is. We don't hedge one way or the other. And I do think this particular election and the investigations of Mr. Trump are truly the greatest test of our democracy, certainly since Watergate. Our processes are under threat. Mr. Trump has questioned their legitimacy, basically saying, I don't need to comply with the Constitution. In 2019, he said, without any pushback, then I have Article 2, where I have the right to do anything I want as president. If that takes hold in this country, the revolution of 1776 has been undone.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so very much for your insight. It was very interesting to hear your thoughts on this. Bruce Fein, John Malcolm, Scott Lucas, thank you very much. And thank you as well for watching. You can always watch this program again anytime by visiting our website at aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And of course, you can join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is at AJ Inside Story. From me, Folly, Thibault, and the whole team here in Doha, thanks for watching. Bye for now.